In the shadowy world of global money and power, two family names have always loomed large, almost like legends: the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. The two dynasties built fortunes. They reshaped the world through banking, oil, influence, and relentless ambition. Yet beneath all that glamour of philanthropy and prestige lie tales of bitter hatred, ruthless backstabbing, temporary alliances, and a shared hunger for control that some say points to a darker allegiance. Y'all might want to grab a drink for yourselves. The ride's about to get bumpy. The Rothschild story traces origins to ancient Canaanite bloodlines via Phoenician traders, Venetian black nobility, or Khazar converts who adopted Judaism but retained pagan roots tied to Illuminati shadows. This fringe view posits the family as descendants of Baal-worshipping elites, evolving into modern bankers who manipulated Europe from hidden enclaves far beyond the standard Frankfurt ghetto tale. Mayer Amschel Rothschild, born in 1744 and died in 1812, formalized this with his five sons establishing branches in London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt by financing kings, governments, and wars, including loans for Britain's Waterloo victory and the Suez Canal. They became international finance icons. This sudden success fueled many questions. A notorious example came in the form of 1846 pamphlets accusing Nathan Rothschild of spreading false news of Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo to crash the London Stock Exchange, then quietly buying up government bonds at bargain prices before the truth emerged, netting him millions in a single day. This was one of those many times the Rothschilds' pattern of dishonest business practices, manipulating information, markets, and crises for personal gain, just as their lord from hell would operate, through deception, cunning, and ruthless profiteering at the expense of nations and ordinary people. Across the ocean, John D. Rockefeller rose from modest upstate New York roots to dominate America's oil boom with unyielding self-interest. He cared for no one but himself and his fortune, viewing competition, workers, and society as obstacles to be crushed if they stood in his way. In 1870, he founded Standard Oil, which by the 1880s controlled 90% of U.S. refineries and pipelines through predatory pricing, secret railroad rebates that gave him unfair advantages over rivals, and ruthless acquisitions that destroyed competitors in the infamous Cleveland Massacre of 1872, absorbing or bankrupting dozens of businesses in mere weeks. These tactics turned oil from a luxury to an affordable staple, dropping prices dramatically, which helped took over the multi-hull market. The human cost was also not negligible. Widespread worker exploitation, dangerous conditions, and violent suppression of labor, most notoriously the 1914 Ludlow Massacre, where company guards and militiamen killed striking miners, their wives and children in Colorado fuel and iron camps under Rockefeller control. Critics have long accused Rockefeller of using philanthropy as a cynical shield for his greed. After the 1911 antitrust breakup of Standard Oil, he aggressively pursued tax avoidance by channeling massive wealth into foundations. He lobbied heavily, through advisors and political allies, for nonprofit tax-exempt status, ultimately securing a New York State charter for the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913 after federal rejection, allowing him to shield fortunes from income and inheritance taxes while retaining control. This set a precedent for the wealthy to dodge taxes via charitable vehicles, diverting public revenue to private agendas at society's detriment. His giving often served personal interests, rebuilding his shattered monopoly's influence through stock purchases in splintered companies, funding eugenics and controversial research, and shaping global policy, all while amassing wealth equivalent to trillions today through banking diversification and global institutions. In the end, Rockefeller's empire was built on a ruthless creed. Society could suffer as long as his money kept growing, proving his philanthropy was less about benevolence and more about self-preservation and power. These families represent ultimate materialism empires built on money, influence, and moral compromises. Stories portray them as eternal rivals, the Rockefellers infiltrating U.S. industry with the Rothschilds backing, only to grow too powerful and spark syndicate wars in the 20th century, backstabbing for supremacy, manipulating economies, funding conflicts, even eugenics scandals while cooperating when needed, like the 2012 alliance where Jacob Rothschild's RIT Capital bought into the Rockefellers' financial services, merging billions in assets. One could also argue that their hatred is theater, because of the many signs that point to shared networks such as the Federal Reserve origins, the Bilderberg meetings, the Trilateral Commission ties, war profiteering, and elite depravity, the Epstein connections being one of the most tangible proofs that we have. Facts lead to make a claim that the two families served their master from hell whom forces them to keep pursuing depopulation, one world control, and idolatry of power. In reality, it is the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds dynasties that hold an iron grip on the levers of global finance, politics, media, and covert influence. Yet beneath this shared dominance simmers an almost existential hatred, a silent, multi-generational war waged through every available channel for nothing less than absolute supremacy over the world order. This feud is not mere business competition, but a brutal contest between two bloodlines with incompatible visions of world control. The ancient European-rooted the Rothschilds banking network versus the brash industrial American empire of the Rockefellers. Signs of early friction appear in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The Rothschilds, having mastered sovereign debt and war financing across Europe, viewed the explosive rise of Standard Oil as an unacceptable encroachment on their domain. John D. Rockefeller's ruthless consolidation, secret railroad rebates that allowed him to undercut prices. The 1872 Cleveland Massacre, where he absorbed or bankrupted 22 of 26 competing refineries in 6 weeks. Predatory acquisitions that left entire towns economically devastated, created an oil monopoly that rivaled European banking power in scale. The Rockefellers were initially seeded or tolerated by Rothschild capital through J.P. Morgan intermediaries, only to become a Frankenstein monster that threatened to eclipse its creators. When the U.S. Supreme Court ordered Standard Oil's breakup in 1911, many interpreted this not as antitrust justice, but as the Rothschilds orchestrating sabotage via Wall Street allies and progressive-era politicians they had influenced and designed to fragment Rockefeller's strength and reassert the Rothschilds' financial primacy. The backstabbing intensified in the 20th century. The so-called syndicate wars of the 1970s are frequently cited. The Rockefellers be pushing American hegemony through institutions like the Council on Foreign Relations and Chase Manhattan Bank, while the Rothschilds defended their European banking stronghold and international monetary influence. Stories circulate of economic sabotage, manipulated currency crises, engineered oil shocks like the 1973 OPEC embargo exploited by both but weaponized against the other, and proxy funding of rival political factions to weaken the opponent's position. Darker tales include indirect involvement in geopolitical conflicts, the Rothschilds financing on both sides of wars for bond profits, the Rockefellers' oil interests fueling proxy wars in the Middle East and Latin America, each side accused of undercutting the other's resource access or political leverage. Perhaps the most chilling chapter of the Rothschilds' backstabbing involves their purported role in the downfall of Richard Nixon, a president some researchers frame as a direct victim of their long war. Nixon, in this view, became a threat when he began probing too deeply into hidden power structures. His Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, Henry Kissinger, is repeatedly described as a Rockefeller creation. Recruited and groomed through David Rockefeller's Council on Foreign Relations, later helping establish the Trilateral Commission. Kissinger's influence steered U.S. policy toward détente with communist powers. Kissinger's true allegiance laid with the Rockefellers' globalist interests, and by extension, a broader elite network that included Rothschild elements. The Watergate scandal was no organic burglary gone wrong, but a meticulously engineered coup. Signs include the heavy CIA presence among the burglars, E. Howard Hunt, James McCord, McCord's strangely amateur duct tape placement that ensured discovery, and the relentless media amplification by the Washington Post, seen as establishment controlled. Nixon's own tapes reveal his paranoia about Jewish influence in media, government, and intelligence, and his demands for CYA files on the Bay of Pigs and JFK assassination.
Malik is not Jewish. No. All right. I want to look at any sensitive areas around where Jews are involved. See, the Jews are all through the government. And we have got to get in those areas. We've got to get the man in charge who is not Jewish to control the Jewish. Do you understand?
I sure
The
do.
government's full of Jews.
I sure do.
Second, most Jews are disloyal. You know what I mean? You have a Garment and a Kissinger. And frankly, a Sapphire.
All these events, as we now know, are all linked to the Rothschilds' banking and covert operations. Proof of this being the tape, where Nixon references the whole Bay of Pigs thing to block FBI probes, what can be interpreted as leverage against intelligence agencies with Rothschild ties. With media dominance in Rothschild hands through influence over wire services, major networks, and publishing, the scandal was blown into an unstoppable force. Nixon's resignation in 1974 cleared the path for Gerald Ford, whose vice president became Nelson Rockefeller, shifting U.S. foreign policy towards stronger pro-Zionist alignment. Post-Nixon, U.S. aid to Israel skyrocketed, cementing what some call full Zionist ideological control over American foreign affairs via Kissinger's legacy and Rockefeller networks. In this telling, the Rothschilds used their media leverage and elite proxies to remove a president who dared challenge the hidden order, proving they would destroy even a sitting U.S. leader to protect their dominion. These stories paint a picture of families so consumed by materialistic greed, trillions in hidden wealth, political puppets, engineered crises, that backstabbing becomes routine strategy. Human suffering, national sovereignty, even presidents become expendable in the pursuit of absolute control. Beneath the veneer of rivalry, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers dynasties have forged uneasy alliances when mutual threats or opportunities demand it, often in pursuit of shared global dominance. These collaborations portray calculated truces in a larger game of power, where materialism, endless wealth accumulation, political manipulation, and human exploitation trumps enmity. Signs of early cooperation traced to the Federal Reserve's 1913 establishment. Rockefellers influenced U.S. banking reforms via J.P. Morgan proxies, while Rothschilds steered international finance, creating a centralized system to enslave nations through debt and inflation for elite profit. Another proof of that is that 2012 partnership. Jacob Rothschild's RIT Capital Partners acquired a 37% stake in Rockefeller Financial Services, merging $34 billion in assets. Publicly hailed as a historic union between David Rockefeller and Jacob Rothschild, friends for 50 years, it fueled suspicions of hidden consolidation post-2008 crisis, blending European banking with American wealth management for market dominance. Darker narratives link this to depopulation agendas. Rockefeller Foundation's eugenics funding, pre-World War II Nazi-linked research, and global health initiatives, echoing Rothschild charitable networks accused of human engineering via vaccines and crises. These alliances extend to secretive forums like the Bilderberg Group since 1954, where both families attend annual meeting plotting oil shocks, pandemics, and wars. The Bilderberg is an Illuminati outpost, blending Rothschild Freemason and Baal worshippers' symbolism with Rockefeller skull and bones ties, orchestrating events like the 1973 oil crisis for profit. The Trilateral Commission, founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller, with the Rothschilds backing pushes globalization, seen as the so-called New World Order NWO blueprint, eroding sovereignty for one world government under their control. The Epstein scandals provide one of the most disturbing modern links, directly tying both families to elite networks of trafficking, blackmail, and influence peddling. Jacob Rothschild's investment firm paid Jeffrey Epstein $25 million for supposed risk assessment services, a transaction that researchers interpret as payment for access to Epstein's blackmail operation, which targeted powerful figures with underage girls. Meanwhile, David Rockefeller's Trilateral Commission and broader elite circles overlapped heavily with Epstein's social and financial orbit, including shared connections to high-level politicians, scientists, and billionaires who frequented Epstein's island and properties. Theorists claim these ties were not coincidental, but part of a coordinated system where compromising material ensured loyalty and control. Historical examples further illustrate their cooperation and exploitation. After World War II, The Rockefellers played a central role in rebuilding Europe through the Marshall Plan and Chase Manhattan bank loans, while the Rothschilds' banking networks quietly provided the international financing backbone, profiting enormously from Reconstruction debt. During the Cold War, détente policies, heavily shaped by Kissinger, a Rockefeller protege, masked proxy wars in Africa, Latin America, and Asia that simultaneously enriched the Rockefellers' oil interests and the Rothschilds linked arms dealers and financiers. In every case, the families set aside surface rivalries to ensure mutual benefit from global chaos, sacrificing millions of lives and entire regions for oil contracts, reconstruction loans, and strategic dominance. The Rothschilds and the Rockefellers dynasties are shrouded in tales of profound depravity, where their insatiable quest for money, power, and material dominance led to moral atrocities that sacrificed human dignity, lives, and even souls, painting them as architects of suffering, willing to exploit, manipulate, and destroy for elite supremacy, embodying ultimate materialism through hidden fortunes, political puppets, and engineered crises. All these stories suggest a willingness to orchestrate genocides, economic collapses, and false flags operations for trillions in gains. The Rothschilds and the Rockefellers families, despite their surface rivalries, ultimately serve the same infernal master from hell, a satanic or Illuminati overlord orchestrating global domination through Luciferian rituals, generational bloodlines, and a new world order. Their red shield, Rothschild means red sign, symbolizing satanic pacts tied to Baal worship or Khazar Canaanite roots. Rockefellers join as one of 13 satanic bloodlines, mocking God's tribes, descended from Merovingian king demonic lineage, practicing trauma-based mind control and rituals. Bilderberg Group, 1954 onward, as Illuminati summits, where Rothschilds and Rockefellers plot pandemics, wars, and depopulation for satanic harvest. Bohemian Grove gatherings, Rockefeller attendees involve mock child sacrifices to Moloch, echoing Rothschild Canaanite legacy. Skull and Bones, Yale Society with Rockefeller members, is dubbed the Brotherhood of Death, initiating elites into Luciferian oaths. Epstein scandals amplify this. Rothschild payments and Rockefeller trilateral overlap suggest adrenochrome rituals, harvesting fear-induced blood from trafficked victims for eternal youth and demonic vitality. The two families are accused of being part of the people that engineered 9/11, COVID as pandemics, the eugenics Rockefeller Nazi funding, the Rothschilds' colonial exploitation, and climate hoaxes like heart manipulation to usher in Antichrist rule. The Rothschilds are Satan's bankers, profiting from Holocaust to push for their Zionism ideology, and the Rockefellers as American proxies in this Zionist satanic plot. Springmeier claims generational Satanism, mind-controlled slaves, ritual abuse, and blood sacrifices to maintain infernal pacts. The Rothschilds and the Rockefellers' legacies endure as towering symbols of unchecked power. Their stories highlight a tangled web of ambition, rivalry, alliance, and alleged depravity that continues to shape how we view global elites. In mainstream history, they are celebrated as visionary capitalists and philanthropists. The Rothschilds as architects of modern international banking. The Rockefellers as pioneers of industry and charitable giving through foundations that funded universities, medical research, and conservation. Yet their shadows loom far darker, eternal players in a game of world domination where human cost is irrelevant. Decades after John D. Rockefeller's death and the Rothschilds' peak influence, their descendants still wield enormous assets, estimated in the hundreds of billions combined, through private trusts, hedge funds, and influence networks. In the end, we get more questions than answers. Are we ruled by visible governments or invisible bloodlines? Do alliances of convenience mask deeper unity? Can ordinary people ever reclaim control from such entrenched power?